have you ever been erased from someone's life, while still standing right there, holding on? I'm Lorraine Madsen. And this is the story of how I went from being a mother who gave everything, to a woman who finally chose herself. It all started with a phone call, just 10 words that changed everything I thought I knew about love, family, and what we owe each other. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below, I'd love to hear from you. It was a Friday afternoon, late October. The kind of day where the air carried a dry chill, and the sun hung lower than usual, casting long, honey-colored shadows across the yard. I remember I was standing at the kitchen window, watching the wind nudge the last of the maple leaves off their branches. My tea was steeping, chamomile, always chamomile when the evenings turned colder. That day, I had just come back from my checkup at the community clinic. Nothing dramatic, just the doctor saying, kindly but firmly, that I needed to slow down. My blood pressure was high, cholesterol creeping up, the usual things they warn you about when you're almost 70 and still trying to do everything yourself. I stood there holding the phone for a few minutes. Just holding it. Not dialing yet. The contact on the screen said Alden, but I stared at the name like it belonged to someone else. I don't know why I hesitated. Maybe part of me knew what was coming. He picked up after 4 rings. I could hear movement in the background, like he was walking through traffic or maybe the hallway of his office. "Hey, Mom," he said. No warmth. Just a formality, like I was a business call. I told him about the appointment, how the doctor had recommended I take it easy, maybe find someone to help out around the house a bit. I mentioned the fall I had the week before, how I landed on my elbow but didn't bruise. There was silence on the other end. Then a sharp exhale, the kind someone gives when they're holding something in too long. "Mom," he said, and his voice changed, like he'd finally made up his mind about something. "I need to be honest with you. You're not welcome in my life anymore. I have my own family now." Just like that. No build-up. No apology. Not even a pause long enough to let me prepare. I didn't say anything right away. My mouth opened but nothing came out. Not because I was shocked. No, maybe because I wasn't. Not really. "I see," I said quietly. Then, just as softly, "Then I won't call again." I ended the call. Not out of anger. Not to punish him. Just because I understood. I stood in the same spot for a long while. The water in the kettle had gone cold. My tea steeped too long and turned bitter, but I drank it anyway. That was the kind of bitterness I could handle. The living room behind me was still, filled with the same things it always had been. A crocheted throw on the couch. A faded rug that used to belong to my mother. The books on the shelf hadn't moved in years, and the photo frames, those told their own stories. One of me and my late husband, Mark, at a church potluck, both squinting into the sun. Another of Alden as a toddler, frosting on his nose, holding a cupcake with both hands. And then the newer one, his wedding. He and Vivica, smiling like they'd won the lottery. I was in that one, too, but off to the side. Almost cropped out. I'd always told myself it was just the angle. It was strange, realizing that a person could live in your house for 18 years, eat the meals you cooked, wear the clothes you folded, and still walk away like none of it mattered. I didn't cry. Not then. I was past crying for things that no longer surprised me. Instead, I rinsed out my mug and made another cup of tea. This time, peppermint. Something a little sharper. I sat by the front window, where the wind had kicked up and the sky was darkening fast. October has a way of stealing light before you're ready. Outside, the neighbor's boy rode by on his bicycle, his backpack bouncing behind him. I remember thinking how Alden used to do the same. Different bike, different boy, but the echo was still there. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I wasn't hungry. I folded the laundry, watered the plants, and set the porch light to timer mode, just like always. But something had changed. Something final. People don't always hurt you with fists or cruelty. Sometimes, all it takes is one sentence, clean, sharp, and permanent. And in that one sentence, I realized I had already stopped being part of his life a long time ago. He just finally said it out loud. I didn't tell anyone about the phone call. Not Ruthie, not Pastor Joel at the church, not even the cashier at Mason's Market who always asked about my son while scanning my tea biscuits and coupons. I kept it tucked away, the way you might cradle a bruise under your sleeve. Quiet. Personal. Something tender and private, best left untouched unless someone dared press. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed with the light off and the ceiling fan clicking just loud enough to drive me mad. Around midnight, I got up and padded down the hallway barefoot, the floorboards creaking under me like old bones. I went to the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. I hadn't opened it in years. Mark built it for me when we first got married. Said every woman needed a place for her memories. The hinges groaned when I lifted the lid, like the whole thing remembered what it was meant to protect. Inside, it still smelled faintly of lavender sachets and thyme. I pulled out a few old linens, a quilt with a loose seam, and there, tucked near the bottom, were the keepsakes I wasn't ready to part with even when Alden moved out. The first thing I found was a birthday card he made when he was 8. The front had a crooked heart and glitter glued in strange places. He'd written Mom instead of Mom and drawn a picture of the two of us standing in front of a wonky house with smoke rising out of the chimney like a cartoon. In scrawly pencil, it said, "I love you best." I smiled. But it was the kind of smile you give a photo of someone who's long gone, not because they're dead, but because they've drifted too far to reach. Next came the flannel sleep shirt I made him for Christmas when he was 10. Navy blue with little red trees. I'd stayed up late hemming the sleeves, thinking how happy he'd be to wear something just for him. I used to joke he looked like a lumberjack elf. He wore it 2 winters, then forgot it ever existed. But I never could toss it. I folded it again and laid it next to the card. Then I just sat there on the bed. No tears. No speeches in the mirror. Just stillness. It wasn't anger sitting next to me that night. I know what anger feels like, hot, sharp, blinding. This was different. This was the absence of something. A hollowed-out place where connection used to live. I had spent my life building something. A life for him. A foundation. I gave him my best years, every steady routine, every carefully packed lunch, every night I stayed up waiting for headlights in the driveway. And now, he had the life he wanted. It just didn't have me in it. And maybe that was the part that stung, not the loss, but the ease of it. Maybe I'd asked for too much. Maybe I'd romanticized motherhood into something more mutual than it ever really was. But I didn't think I was unreasonable. I never asked for grand gestures. I didn't need spa days or surprise trips. I just wanted to be remembered. To be included. A phone call on holidays. A photo of the grandbaby. A birthday text that didn't feel forced. That's all. The next morning, Ruthie came by, same as always, holding a brown paper bag with one handle torn and the other looped around her wrist. She never knocked, just tapped twice and called out before letting herself in. "Morning, Miss Lorraine," she said from the kitchen. "I brought the stuff you asked for, and a few things you didn't." I was sitting at the table in my robe. My tea had gone cold. She poked her head around the corner and paused. Her eyes narrowed just a little, like she could read the air. "You didn't mention Alden once today," she said. "That's a first." I said nothing. She didn't push. Ruthie never did. That was something I appreciated about her, she left space without making it feel like silence. She just sat down across from me, poured herself a cup of tea from the same pot, and opened the mystery novel I'd lent her weeks ago. We sat like that for 20, maybe 30 minutes. No words. Just pages turning, tea sipping, two women keeping each other company without needing to explain why. And somehow, in that silence, I felt my lungs loosen. Later that afternoon, I dusted the shelves in my bedroom. The kind of cleaning you do not because it needs doing, but because your heart needs something to do with its hands. In the bottom drawer of my nightstand, I found a pale blue envelope, its edges yellowed just slightly. I knew what it was before I touched it. To Alden, wedding day. My handwriting was neat back then. Hopeful. I'd written it the night before his wedding. I wasn't asked to speak at the reception, but I had things I wanted to say. I told him how proud I was. That I understood his new life came with new boundaries. That I'd always be nearby, quietly rooting for him. I didn't blame him for the seating arrangement, or the lack of a dance with the groom. I told myself I'd find the right moment to give it to him. That moment never came. I traced the edge of the envelope with my thumb, wondering if it would make any difference now. Wondering if he'd even read it if I sent it. In the end, I tucked it back inside the drawer. Some things don't need to be heard. Not because they're not worth saying, but because the person they're meant for stopped listening long ago. And maybe never really started. There were signs, if I'm honest, long before the phone call. But like most mothers, I brushed them aside, convinced myself they were part of growing up. Part of Alden becoming his own person. Back when he was in middle school, he never liked me coming to his school plays. Once, I remember standing at the back of the auditorium while he played a tree, just a tree, in a Thanksgiving skit. I was so proud, clapping louder than anyone else. But when he came home, he didn't say a word about the performance. Instead, he asked me not to wave so much next time. Said it made him feel weird. He never wanted me to pack his lunches either. Said the other kids made fun of the notes I used to tuck inside, little drawings or Bible verses. I stopped after the third time he brought his lunch home, untouched. I used to tell myself, he's a teenager. They get embarrassed. They push away the people they love because they think it makes them stronger. I told myself he'd grow out of it. But now, looking back, maybe he didn't grow out of it. Maybe he just grew away from me. And maybe he never looked back. It had been almost a year since I tried to visit San Diego. Alden's son, my grandson, was turning 3. I thought I'd surprise them with a homemade quilt, bright blues and reds, his initials stitched in the corner. I baked cookies, wrapped them carefully, and took the bus down on a Saturday morning. I remember standing outside their front door, holding the gifts like offerings. Vivica opened the door. Her smile was tight, polite, almost mechanical. "Oh, Lorraine. I wish Alden had told me you were coming." I didn't stay long. I gave them the quilt, said a quick hello to the boy, who stared at me like I was a stranger, and left before dinner. No one asked me to stay. Now, a year later, I understood exactly why. That Monday, an email arrived in my inbox. From Vivica. "For future clarity, we'd appreciate if all future communication is made through email. Alden's mental health is a priority, and your recent attempt to visit was disruptive." That word, disruptive, cut deeper than anything Alden ever said. I wasn't hurt. Not exactly. I was stunned. Like I'd knocked on the door of my own child's life and been told, kindly and professionally, that there was no vacancy. I sat in my recliner, holding the printed email with both hands. My fingers trembled. Not out of rage, but out of something sadder. Finality. So that's what I was now. A disruption. That afternoon, I tried to keep busy. I mopped the kitchen floor, watered the basil plant, changed the sheets. Routine was good. It kept my mind from spiraling. But while wiping the tile near the fridge, I stepped back too fast. My heel caught the edge of a damp spot. I slipped, fell sideways, and hit the floor hard enough to knock the wind out of me. I don't know how long I lay there. Maybe 2 minutes, maybe 10. But when I opened my eyes, Ruthie was standing over me, panic in her voice. "Oh God, Miss Lorraine, are you okay? Don't move." She helped me sit up, then insisted we go straight to the clinic. I argued, of course I did, but she wouldn't take no for an answer. And truth be told, I was grateful. My hip ached, and my pride was already bruised beyond repair. At the clinic, they ran the usual tests. The doctor was kind, maybe younger than Alden, and spoke gently. "Your blood pressure's high, ma'am. Nothing serious now, but we're nearing red flags. I'd advise less stress, more rest. You live alone?" I nodded. He turned to Ruthie. "Can she call you if something happens again?" Ruthie squeezed my hand and smiled. "She already does." On the ride home, Ruthie turned to me and asked softly, "Do you have someone to call if it ever gets bad? Like, really bad?" I looked at her. This 20-something woman with chipped nail polish, a messy ponytail, and a heart bigger than her paycheck. I smiled. "I already have someone," I said. "You're sitting right here." It was Ruthie's idea, not mine. She brought it up one Sunday morning while I was out in the front yard, pruning the mums before the frost hit. The sun hadn't fully burned through the cloud cover yet, and the air still carried that sleepy, late autumn chill. I was wearing Mark's old flannel shirt over my dress, sleeves rolled, hands dirty with soil and memory. "You ever been to First Covenant over on Pine?" she asked, casually, like she was offering me a cookie instead of a decision. I shook my head. "Not since Mark passed," I said. "We used to go to St. Luke's, but it never felt the same without him." She nodded, then crouched beside me, brushing a leaf off her jeans. "We're having a gathering tonight. Nothing formal, just some songs, a few stories, maybe a casserole or two. I'll be on the piano. You'd fit right in." I laughed, more out of politeness than certainty. "You're mistaking quiet for calm, Ruthie. I'm more broken porch swing than church pew these days." She didn't push. Just smiled and said, "Well, even broken things still catch the breeze." I don't know why I went. Maybe it was the way she said it. Maybe it was the silence in my house lately, the kind that wraps around your ankles like cold bathwater. The church was small, almost hidden behind a diner and a dusty dry cleaner with flickering neon signs. Inside, it smelled like lemon oil, dust, and decades of whispered prayers. The pews didn't match, some were padded, some wood, all worn soft by time and use. There were hand-knit cushions and handwritten bulletins, and a warmth that didn't come from heat vents or candles, but from the way people looked at you when you entered, like they were already glad you came. Ruthie sat at the old upright piano and played something slow, familiar but unintrusive. People wandered in, some in Sunday clothes, others in jeans and hoodies. A woman with twin toddlers passed out napkins while an older man in suspenders carried in a crock pot with steam rising from the lid. No one seemed in a rush. No one wore the kind of smile that's meant to cover anything. They started with a prayer, not the rehearsed kind, just a moment of quiet, and then people began to share. Stories, mostly. One woman talked about learning how to be alone again after her husband of 40 years passed. A young man in his 20s shared how he'd finally told his father he wasn't coming back to the family farm. Another woman admitted she hadn't forgiven her sister for something she couldn't even name. No one interrupted. No one advised. They just listened. When it got quiet again, Ruthie glanced at me. She didn't nudge. She didn't ask. But her look said, "You can, if you want." And I did. I stood up, slowly, knees a little stiff. My voice shook at first, but not from nerves. More like dust being brushed off something long and used. "I raised a boy," I said. "A good boy, once. His name's Alden. I lost my husband when Alden was little, so it was just the two of us for a long time. I did what I could. Worked 2 jobs some years. Skipped my own doctor visits so he could get braces. I packed lunches with little notes, even when he stopped reading them. I paused, let my breath settle. And now, I think he's decided I don't belong in his life anymore. He said it plainly, actually. You're not welcome in my life." No one gasped. They didn't need to. I looked around and added, "I didn't come here to complain. I guess I'm trying to figure out what you do with love that has nowhere to go." When I sat back down, a woman with white hair and a scarf wrapped twice around her shoulders came over and hugged me. She smelled like peppermint and dryer sheets. She leaned in close and said, just above a whisper, "Sometimes your real family starts showing up, after the blood ones walk out." I didn't cry. But I felt something shift, like a locked window easing open. That night, back home, I pulled the old wedding letter from its hiding place. The one I'd written to Alden before his ceremony. The words still looked hopeful, even now. Like they didn't know they'd never be read. I lit a match, held it to the corner, and watched as it curled into flame over the sink. The ashes swirled, delicate as snow. It wasn't rage. It was relief. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about pretending it didn't happen. It's about finally letting the burden fall from your hands, and watching it land somewhere that isn't your chest. 2 weeks passed. Then, one evening, Ruthie showed up at my door with red-rimmed eyes and a plastic bag that sagged in the middle. "Lost my job," she said. "They're cutting staff at the clinic." "Hi. I don't know where I'm gonna go." I didn't even let her finish. "This house has more rooms than sense," I said. "You take the back bedroom. I've got tea. You've got biscuits. That seems like fair rent to me." She blinked. "You sure?" "I'm not rescuing you," I said. "You're not rescuing me. We're just keeping each other company." She moved in that night with one suitcase and a plant named Otis. It started with the envelope. I found it buried in the drawer where I kept warranties, expired coupons, and appliance manuals from machines I no longer owned. I was looking for a light bulb, of all things. Instead, I pulled out the manila folder marked important, and there it was, my living will. Neatly printed. Notarized. Signed in black ink on a Tuesday back in 2009, when I still believed everything I owned would go to Alden without question or complication. The house. The modest savings account I'd built up over decades at Pine Bookstore. The life insurance policy I took out when Alden was 9 and had chipped his tooth on the monkey bars. I remember thinking then, if anything ever happens to me, he needs to be okay. It used to feel right. Natural. You raise a child, you leave them something. Your love, your money, your legacy. That's what good mothers do. That's what I did. But now, looking at that piece of paper, something inside me tilted ever so slightly. Not like a collapse. More like a slow, careful shift, like a picture frame finally hanging level after years of leaning. I left the envelope on the coffee table, next to the remote. Each night, while the evening news mumbled on, I'd glance at it. In the morning, I'd move it to the kitchen counter so I wouldn't forget it. By noon, I'd move it back. It became a kind of quiet ritual. One part memory, one part reconsideration. I wasn't angry. That would have been simpler. It was more like sobering up. Alden hadn't removed me from his life out of tragedy or accident. It wasn't distance or busy schedules. It was intent. Design. He had constructed a life with very specific entry requirements, and I didn't make the cut. I thought about what Pastor Joel said once during a sermon I only half listened to: there's a difference between being cut out and stepping away. And I finally understood which one I had control over. So one Thursday, I packed a small overnight bag. Not much, just my green knit dress, the one with the wooden buttons, my walking shoes, and a scarf Ruthie had given me for Christmas. I brewed peppermint tea and left a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to San Diego. Back by Saturday. Don't panic. L. I didn't tell Ruthie because I didn't want her to talk me out of it or into it. I needed to see it for myself. Not the house or the city. Him. The bus pulled into San Diego mid-afternoon. It was warmer there, and louder. I took a cab to a small park 2 blocks from the address Alden had listed on a Christmas card 3 years ago. I hadn't received one since. I didn't need a map. I remembered the house from photos: red door, white trim, a little lavender hedge by the mailbox. It looked exactly like the kind of life you'd expect someone to brag about at reunions. Polished. Functional. Picturesque. I sat on a bench across the street. The sun slid slowly behind the rooftops. The jacaranda trees were shedding their purple blossoms, carpeting the sidewalk in soft color. Then the door opened. Vivica came out first. Sunglasses. Shoulder bag. The sort of effortless elegance that photographs well. A child followed, my granddaughter. I didn't know her name. Blonde hair, bouncy walk, a stuffed dog tucked under one arm. She pointed at something in the sky and squealed. Then Alden emerged. Collared shirt. Sunglasses. He looked fine. Handsome, even. A man who belonged wherever he was. He ushered them into a silver SUV, his hand brushing Vivica's shoulder in a motion so familiar I felt like an intruder for watching. He glanced down the street. And then he looked past me. Maybe he didn't recognize me. Maybe he did. I didn't flinch either way. He got in the car, started the engine, and drove away. I sat there for another 20 minutes, just to be sure I wasn't going to cry. Then I stood. Brushed off the bench. Walked back to the bus stop. The next morning, Flagstaff welcomed me with the scent of pine and the sound of quiet. I fed the neighbor's orange tabby who liked to pretend he was mine. I made toast with too much jam. And then I called Caraway Legal Services. The woman on the line remembered me. Mrs. Madsen, it's been a while. Everything okay? Better than it's been in a long time, I said. By Wednesday, I was sitting across from a paralegal named Ethan who wore corduroy pants and smelled faintly of citrus soap. He passed me a stack of documents and pointed where to sign. One by one, I signed away the future I had once assumed was fixed. Alden's name disappeared. In its place, Ruthie Klein. No fanfare. No dramatic gesture. Just a decision. A clear one. That night, Ruthie came home carrying a grocery bag and a tired smile. I found Earl Grey, she said. On sale, too. I poured 2 cups, this time from the blue china set Mark's mother had given me the year we married. She didn't ask why. And I didn't explain. But I set the cups down gently and said, "Tonight, we drink like queens." It was 2 nights after I'd signed the new will. We were sitting at the kitchen table, eating dinner like we usually did, casual and unhurried. She had made herself a grilled cheese, her favorite kind with pickles layered inside, and I had my usual bowl of tomato soup, doctored up with a splash of cream and a bit of fresh basil from the windowsill pot. The air smelled warm, like brown butter and bread. Jazz drifted softly from the radio. Miles Davis, I think. Funny how the simplest things can feel like a cathedral when you've known enough silence. I reached over, opened the drawer by the fridge, and pulled out the manila folder. No ceremony, no hesitation. Just slid it across the table toward her. She looked at me like I'd handed her a live bird. "What's this?" "My will," I said, sipping from my spoon. "Updated. Your name's in it now. For everything." She froze mid-bite. Set her sandwich down carefully, like it might break. "Miss Lorraine," she said slowly, I'm not even," she stopped herself. "Not even what?" I asked, not unkindly. She stared at the folder like it might disappear if she didn't look too hard. "You're not my mother," she finally said. "We're not. I mean, I bring you groceries. I fix the porch light sometimes. That doesn't mean—" I leaned back in my chair, bowl warm in my hands. My voice stayed soft. "You think this is about groceries?" She didn't answer. I tilted my head, watching her the way you watch a bird edge closer to your palm. "You never made me earn space in my own home," I said. "That counts for something." She looked down, brushing breadcrumbs into her palm. "I just like being here." "I know," I said. "And I like that you are." "That's enough." She didn't say anything after that. Just quietly gathered the dishes and washed them, the way she always did, humming low under her breath like the kitchen had ears and she didn't want to wake it. The next part came quietly. No warning, no storm. A week later, a letter came in the mail. The envelope was familiar, white, stamped from Caraway Legal Services. I assumed it was just the confirmation copy of my updated will. I set it on the table, didn't open it right away. I had sage to water out front, and the sun was just beginning to stretch out golden across the porch. By the time I came back in, the letter was gone. Ruthie had opened it by mistake. Her name was on the copy, after all. That wasn't the problem. The problem was the return address hadn't been updated. It had gone to the old San Diego address first. And someone there, maybe a neighbor, maybe the post office, had made sure it reached Alden. I didn't know any of this until the phone rang just past sunset. The landline, not my cell. The kind of ring that slices through a quiet house like a knife. I stared at the receiver, let it ring once, twice, then picked up. "Hello?" There was a pause. "Mom." The word landed like a pebble in a still pond. Quiet, but echoing. "Yes," I said. "What the hell is this?" he asked. His voice was sharp, but not yelling. Almost stunned. I didn't ask what he meant. "You're leaving everything to someone named Ruthie Klein? Who even is that?" "My will," I said, calm. "My life. Nothing else." "You did this to hurt me," he snapped. "Because I told you we needed space?" I walked to the window. The porch light had come on. Moths batted their wings around the glass, drawn to something that wouldn't ever hold them. "No," I said. "Not to hurt you. To give you what you asked for. You said I didn't belong in your life anymore. I'm just helping you follow through. You know that's not what I meant." I smiled faintly. "You said it clearly," I replied. "You told me you had your own family now. That I was complicating things. You asked me to stop calling. Stop showing up. So I did." He didn't speak. After a long pause, he said, almost like a child again, "You're my mother." "That's a title," I said gently. "What you do with it is up to you." He let out a short breath, more sigh than scoff. "I didn't think you'd actually cut me out." I didn't raise my voice. Didn't cry. I just told the truth. "I didn't cut you out, Alden. You walked out. I just closed the door behind you." he didn't respond. Just silence on the line. I waited a few seconds, then said, "Good night, son." And I hung up. Not out of anger. Out of peace. I turned 69 on a Wednesday. It was one of those soft, honey-colored spring days in Flagstaff, the kind that makes you forget, for a moment, how long winter lasted. The lilacs had bloomed again by the porch steps. I hadn't trimmed them properly in years, but they came back anyway, wild and defiant. I admired that about them. There was no card from Alden in the mailbox. No voicemail. No flowers delivered from some app on his phone. But I hadn't expected one. Not this year. Not anymore. Ruthie made dinner. Spaghetti with mushrooms and zucchini sautéed in olive oil and garlic. She brought home a loaf of garlic bread that she insisted was homemade. I didn't argue, though the plastic wrapper in the trash told a different story. We ate by the window with the radio playing Billie Holiday low in the background. She lit 2 candles, not for celebration, really, just because they smelled like cinnamon and made the kitchen feel warmer. "Do you have a favorite birthday?" she asked me between bites, twirling her fork like she was genuinely curious. I thought for a moment. "The last one I spent with Alden," I said. He'd just turned 18. Senior year. I'd managed to buy him a used laptop from the pawn shop over on 6th Street. Took me half a year to pay it off. "What did he say?" she asked gently. "He said thank you," I replied, and paused, letting the words sit. But he never looked up from the screen. Said it while scrolling through something, like I wasn't really there. I didn't say it with bitterness. The sting had faded over time, like a scar you forget about until someone brushes against it just right. But the ache, that stayed. Not sharp. Just steady. After dinner, Ruthie ducked into her room and came back with a small, square parcel wrapped in brown craft paper and tied with yarn. "I didn't know what to get someone who doesn't want more stuff," she said, handing it to me with that lopsided grin of hers. "So I went with something useless but nice." I opened it slowly. Inside was a simple wooden frame. Handmade, by the look of it, smooth edges, no shine. Inside was a photograph of us sitting in the backyard. I was holding a glass of iced tea, squinting from the sun, and Ruthie had smudges of dirt across her cheek from repotting herbs. We were both laughing. Real, belly laughing. I couldn't remember the last time a picture caught me in that state. I stared at it for a while. Then I stood up, walked over to the living room mantel, and looked at the dusty frame that had held Alden's high school graduation photo for the last 15 years. The corners had curled slightly from heat, and the glass had gone cloudy. I picked it up. Heavy, somehow. I opened the back, slid the photo out, and, for a moment, held it in my hand. He looked so young. Barely a man. The cap tilted slightly. That half-smile he wore when he didn't want to admit he was proud. I slipped the photo into a drawer and placed the new picture in its place. That spot on the mantel didn't feel like a shrine. It felt like it belonged to the present. Ruthie didn't say anything. She just watched me with that quiet understanding that never asked questions. We sat in the living room a while longer. The candles burned lower. The cat from down the street came to the window again, but didn't come in. I leaned back in the armchair, letting the silence stretch comfortably between us. Then I closed my eyes, just for a moment, and whispered under my breath. "You chose to leave. I chose to stay, with peace." Later that night, after Ruthie had gone to bed, I pulled out the old writing desk in my room, the one Mark had refinished for me our second year of marriage. The hinges squeaked. The drawer stuck halfway. I took out a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No dear Alden. Just the truth. "Alden, if you're reading this, I want you to know, I never stopped loving you. But love isn't about holding tight. Sometimes, it's letting go with both hands. You wanted distance. I honored it. You wanted freedom. I respected it. This isn't about revenge. It's about release. I forgive you. But I don't forget. Mom. I folded the letter once, slowly, like tucking in a child. Slid it into a plain envelope. On the front, I wrote nothing. No name. No date. Just slipped it into the lockbox with the revised will and closed the latch. And then I turned off the light, pulled the quilt over my legs, and lay back into the quiet. It was a quiet morning in February. One of those mornings where the frost clings to the windows just a little longer, and even the birds seem hesitant to sing. Ruthie knocked gently on my bedroom door twice before calling out. "Miss Lorraine? You want your tea hot or iced today?" No answer. She waited a moment, then pushed the door open slowly, just in case I'd fallen asleep again after waking. But I hadn't woken. I was lying there in bed, the covers pulled up neatly, my glasses resting on the nightstand. My hands folded softly on my stomach like I was waiting for someone to finish a story. My breathing had stopped, but nothing else looked disturbed. No pain. No struggle. Just stillness. On the small table beside me sat a half-finished cup of chamomile tea, now cold, and a worn copy of The Book Thief, a bookmark stuck halfway through chapter 19. Underneath it, Ruthie later found a folded piece of notebook paper. Just one sentence written in my old, careful handwriting. In the end, I lived a life that didn't need to be forgiven, just chosen. The funeral was small. I'd never wanted anything big, no flowers with price tags, no slideshow of my younger days. Just a service at the local chapel and a hymn or two. Ruthie handled it all, read the 23rd Psalm herself. Her voice wavered once near the end, but she never stopped. A few days after I passed, Alden came back to Flagstaff. He came alone. No Vivica. No child tugging at his hand. No apology waiting on his lips. Ruthie answered the door and let him in without a word. He stepped into the house like someone stepping into a memory they no longer owned. Everything looked the same, the wallpaper, the teacup stains on the counter, but the feeling was different. Like the air no longer recognized him. He sat at the dining table, the one where I'd once helped him glue macaroni to cardboard for a second-grade art project. Ruthie slid a plain white envelope across to him. On the front, in familiar script, it read, "For Alden, if you still care to read." He opened it slowly. Inside, he found a letter. Nothing dramatic. No guilt-tripping. Just the truth. "Son, you once told me I didn't belong in your life. I heard you. And, for the first time, I chose to agree, not because I stopped loving you, but because I realized I was allowed to choose myself, too. Don't be sad that I left you nothing. I already gave you everything, my years, my strength, my love, and every ounce of my quiet hope. You were the one who set it down." As for Ruthie, she never asked for a thing. But somehow, she gave me everything I never thought I'd feel again: comfort, ease, and the freedom to exist without apology. One day, I hope you learn this truth: blood doesn't make a family. Family is where you don't have to shrink yourself to be welcome. Mom. Alden didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just sat there, quiet, letting the words settle. Later, he wandered into the living room. He paused in front of the shelf that once held all the family photos. There, tucked in a corner, was a small frame, his old childhood photo at age 8, the one where he wore overalls and had a gap in his smile. But something was missing. The photo had been removed. Just the frame remained. He picked it up, turned it over, and saw a yellowed note taped to the back. It was written on the torn corner of a shopping list, scrawled in faded pen. I used to think I was the reason she kept going. But maybe I was the reason she never got to start. There was no signature. No explanation. Just the truth. Weeks later, Ruthie straightened up the house. She didn't change much. The furniture stayed where it was, the same tea mugs remained in the cupboard. But when she got to the family shelf, she dusted it gently and left one section completely empty. When a friend came by and asked, "Why not fill that spot with something new?" Ruthie simply shook her head. "Some people," she said, "spend their whole lives just wanting a place. That space is hers. Even now. Because sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is hold space for someone who finally chose themselves. You know, sometimes I think we spend half our lives trying to earn a place that was never ours to begin with. And the other half, if we're lucky, learning that we don't need to." I used to believe that being a mother meant giving until there was nothing left. But now, in these quieter years, I've come to see that love isn't about what you give away, it's about what you choose to keep sacred. Your peace. Your dignity. Your right to be seen. Maybe you've been there, too, pouring into someone who stopped noticing the weight you carried. Maybe you're still there. If this story touched something tender in you, I hope you'll stay a while. Maybe we'll sit again next time, just two folks sharing a little truth over a warm cup. Until then, take good care of that heart of yours. It's braver than you think.